What the states not being able to take action against these drones because of FAA regulations in this latest iteration of an omnibus bill to end the year and spend another $1 trillion have in common? They can both be prevented by cause. Let's get into it.
Doesn't anyone notice this? I feel like I'm taking crazy pills!
I don't want you to ride. I don't want you to write to your congressman because I wouldn't know what to tell you to write. I don't know what to do about the depression and the inflation and the Russians and the crime in the streets. All I know is that first, you've got to get mad.
Is the whole world gone crazy? Am I the only one around here who gives a shit about the rules?
You have the luxury of not knowing what I know.
I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, "I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!"
Hello, everybody, and welcome back. George Gavaris here, Patriot Think Tank. Thank you for joining. The chat is live on all platforms. So give me a second here. I just got to move. There we go. The chat is live on all platforms. I have tested it. If whatever platform you're on, you'll probably see me having commented test. That was just to make sure that it comes up on my screen. And so far it has. My phones are blowing up though. But that being said, I want to get into some of these things going on. Number one, the omnibus bill, and I call it an omnibus because that's what it is this legislation going through the House to try and keep the government open, and also about some other constitutional issues I have with the drone situation regarding states being able to take action if they feel a threat. Now, before I get started, I do want to let you guys know I'm in full cause gear today because I am going to be bringing up convention estates quite frequently in this conversation. This particular one is available in the t-shirt store or in the Etsy store. Link to it is in the description. It's thepatriotthinktank.com. This one is one of my faves. The founders have my 6 by giving me Article 5. Has a barcode scan on it that you can scan or have someone else scan to sign the petition. So really cool gear. There's a lot of other cool gear as well. So, and don't forget to follow whichever platform we're on. Right now we're on X, YouTube, Rumble, and Facebook. So follow and click the notify live button, whatever version of it is on the platform you're on, just to make sure that when I do come on, that you get an alert and that you can join. And also, as always, if anyone has any questions about Article 5 in any way whatsoever, drop it in the chat. No matter what topic I'm talking about, I will hold the horses to go ahead and address the question. So the omnibus bill. So Johnson has been getting some heat for even putting this bill forth. And, you know, the first thing I thought when I started hearing some of the critique about it was, it is an omnibus bill. Now, some people are saying, no, it's not. Just because it gets into healthcare and agriculture and that's just funding the departments, and the single subject of the bill is to fund the government. So then that's okay. But there are other things in this bill that are not like that. And for the love of God, trying to sift through it is just ridiculous. And that's something, you know, you've heard a lot, right, that I've talked about when it comes to the government overreach topic of convention of states, right? That the 3 topics that we have are term limits, fiscal restraints, and government overreach, right? So government overreach, one of the things that I certainly have been screaming for, I know Cause Grassroots and even, you know, the Convention of States Project in general has been mentioning often, is a single subject legislation amendment. And basically what that means is that when you pass a bill, the bill has to be on one subject, right? And it's to avoid this very thing that this current bill is doing. And a good example of breaches of faith of the American people in Congress is when a veterans bill passes, and this is not a leftist thing. The uniparty is one. There are plenty of Republican bills that have passed using the same technique. And what they do is they'll say, "Hey, we need let's take right now, right? We've got funding for North Carolina relief victims, right, which is desperately needed. They dropped the ball majorly there. So it's like, hey, we've got this $100 billion that's slated for North Carolina residents. And in the same bill, they put protections, right, for, and this is the current bill, they put protections for House members from inquiry. So what do I mean by that? Well, it's the language of it. Now, Vivek brought this up, and they brought it up in the context of it would protect the January 6th committee because it basically protects all data. It is very House data, and it's very convoluted and can likely be interpreted in a million different ways. One of which will be, we don't have to give these subpoenas, we don't have to answer these subpoenas because we're protected by this legislation. So let me give you an idea of what one of these things are. So let me just come back to my main feature here. I tried to capture this window. Oh, it didn't work. Ah, good grief. You know, I thought I was brilliant, and then, well, just wasn't. Let me see if changing this will do any better. Oh, that's why. Okay. So I think I got it now. This again. There it is. So this is buried in the midst of 1,500 pages that you would never get. And it kills me that guys like Vivek and even Alex Jones and the rest of these folks, they talk about these things that are in the legislation, but they don't give you a reference point to go read it yourself. So it's like, just trust me. And I'm like, I don't trust you. It's not how this works. Like, if you're going to tell me something's in there, and it's not that I don't believe them instinctively, it's that you need to tell me where it is. If you're going to tell me that there's something in there that's protecting the January 6th committee, then I need to know where it is, and I want to see the convoluted, crazy language that it comes with. So here's this motion to quash or modify. All right. So as you can see on the screen, right, upon a now this is going to be total verbal gymnastics, right? So you're going to have to hold your hats for this one. You need a degree just to read this you need classes just to read this paragraph. Upon a motion made promptly by a House office or provider for a House office, a court of competent jurisdiction shall quash, meaning void, delete, or modify any legal process directed to the provider for a House office. All right. So this is what they're saying, I believe. If someone comes in with the subpoena or someone tries to get information, they call it House data, which includes, they'd explain it in the bill as well. House data includes all electronic communications, handwritten communications, verbal communications, like literally everything. Right. And if you, it says, shall quash or modify, so void and negate any legal process directed to the provider for House office if compliance with the legal process would require the disclosure of House data of the House office. So if I go to your particular portion, and then there's a million different offices in the House. If I go to yours and say, hey, we need, we're doing an investigation, we need X, Y, and Z, we need you to produce all this data, they'll turn to this and say, I don't have to do that. Which is insane, it's unconstitutional, but it's actually in this bill that's designed to keep the government open. Okay, and the fact of the matter is, and if someone sees somewhere in this 1,500-page monstrosity, other language that gets into this, it took me long, and I would never be control effing the word quash. Like it's just ridiculous. And so, but I eventually found this, and for the other accusations that are being made about this, this is enough, because this makes it two subjects. And even though we haven't passed an amendment for the single subject, if you remember when McCarthy was being beaten down by Gates and his band of 11 merry House representatives who were standing up to him and standing up to the machine, one of the rules that they had entered in was a single subject amendment. So it's a rule in the House that there cannot be more than one subject, okay, on a bill. Yet here we are. This entire thing is null and void right off the scoop. All right, right off the scoop. But my point to it is this can be eliminated altogether, because what you're seeing is that, okay, they made a rule and they completely ignore it, which is just a testament to the dysfunctionality of the federal government. They go, if you make a House rule, you need to abide by the House rule. These are things you learn in kindergarten, right? And especially since they all agreed to these rules. But that's not what's happening, right? That's not what's happening. What's happening is they're saying, screw it, and we're just going to, this is what we're getting in before Trump takes office, and this is how we're going to do it. Sorry, let me get rid of this. So, and that's my point, right? They should not be, just the very fact that there's another subject, the second subject in this legislation, the entire thing should be null and void. But no, we're sitting here debating, and the power, by the way, of just being able to broadcast to people, you know, and collect people and get them motivated. In one tweet, Elon Musk turned this whole thing around. Turn the whole thing around. All right. They're all in there. Mind you, you're going to keep hearing them say, this is bipartisan. This is bipartisan. This is bipartisan. It's uniparty. It's not bipartisan. There's plenty of partisan disagreement in the House. The fact of the matter is they can't get enough of it. All right. To stop this thing on their own. Now that Musk went ahead and said what I've been screaming on X for weeks now, is that we need to be taking names. We need to be taking names. We want to know who are the ones, because they're going to start outing themselves now. Okay, this is where they out themselves, the uniparty members. And if you don't believe that there's a uniparty, you're crazy. All right, just let me remind you, Dick Cheney came out and publicly endorsed a Marxist over President Trump. All right, they are indeed a uniparty. And the fact that they're being unmasked right now is absolutely spectacular. And they're about to start unmasking themselves even more, because anyone who starts for ridiculous, nonsensical reasons, which is what's going on with the BS accusations, right? All of it. Anyone who comes out in Congress, and the Senate in particular, and comes out and starts playing this game that they're not going to approve a perfectly legitimate appointee over some political nonsense, that name needs to be written down by the voter, and we need to primary those individuals. And so Elon Musk, you know, I can say it as much as I want, right? He says it and the House stops, right? And he literally tweeted that anyone who votes for this bill should be primaried in 2 years. And all of a sudden, the entire House of Representatives got a wake-up call that we don't care if you're Republican. We never did. We never looked at it as the Republicans, at least not the driving force behind this election. We never looked at this win as being, we won the House and Senate. It's silly to think so, because the driving force behind this election is that we understand that Republicans suck too. We understand that none of you like us. We get that. At least a lot of you do not like us. And we're fine with that, because we don't like you either. So the reality of the matter is, though, if you haven't noticed, to the folks in the House, we're kind of flexing our muscles these days. And the fact of the matter is, when it comes down to who in the Senate is trying to block appointees, who in the House is signing on to trillion-dollar garbage bills, like, we're taking names. So you could start representing your constituents, and stop explaining to us as if we're 2-year-olds why it's necessary for you to vote for all of this nonsense that comes with this bill, because there's money in it for North Carolina, or we're helping the farmers, or we all want to do those things, okay? Although the agriculture subsidies need to come to a close. I'll say that right now. They need to come to a close, as do a lot of other things, to just make that playing field level. The days of paying farmers to trash their crops need to end. It just needs to go away. But the fact is, As far as North Carolina is concerned, yeah, we want them to get that $100 billion. We wanted them to have it in the beginning so they didn't have to suffer this damn long. But the idea that the only way you'll give it to them is if we give a pass to the January 6th committee is insanity. It's insanity. And stop insulting our intelligence by freaking talking to us like, well, if you don't want to pass this bill, then you don't want to help the people in North Carolina. That's just nonsense. And it's so refreshing to see that, like, this thing's probably not going to pass. This is going to be the first time. They do this every year, by the way. If you're just catching up with politics now, they do this every year. They do it every year, and they hold off before the election because they're really supposed to be passing it in September. They punt it till December so we get past the election. Then they go ahead and organize themselves as who the new players in the game are, and then they go ahead and squeeze this thing through in the dead of night, where with 3 days or 8 days, I think it is, to read this 1,500. Just reading that paragraph could take some people a half an hour to fully comprehend what the hell they're even trying to talk about with the verbal salad that they throw in there. You got to read 1,500 pages of that in 8 days and then make an educated decision as to whether you're for or against a bill? Which brings me to the next point. Anybody who votes for that bill, like Elon Musk is saying they need to be primaried, it's not just because the bill is atrocious. They need to be primaried because they're okay voting for 1,500 pages of gobbledygook that they didn't read. Anyone who casts a vote for a bill that they didn't read should be primaried, period, on either side of the aisle. Period. And the gross thing about it is that almost all of Congress would be gone. Almost all of them. Even the sponsors of the bills don't fully read them. Like, the people who are writing all this garbage, they're not even elected officials. And the elected officials just give passes to this junk because they ain't going to sit there and read 1,500 pages. Why does it have to be 1,500 pages? It doesn't have to be 1,500 pages. But it's 1,500 pages because the entire legislation is designed to confuse the crap out of the people. That's why it's 1,500 pages. And that's a practice that needs to end. And when we do call this convention and this topic comes up, I'm going to be screaming from the rafters again to not only have it be single subject, but there should be a freaking size limit as well. There's no law that you need to make that needs to go more than 20 pages, number 8 font. There just isn't. There's just not that much to say. The founders were able to give us all of the freaking guidelines, all of the stopgaps that will be necessary to run this country and structure it and function, and for it to function in about 4 or 5 handwritten pages. That's just the idea that we have to use small font on 1,500 pages. I mean, have you seen that thing? It stacks like it's absolutely ridiculous. But yet here we are. It's just absolutely ridiculous. But an amendment now if there's they can blow off House rules because they're all the House. So if they decide that they don't want to, if they decide, well, you know what, we all decide together that we're not interested in following this rule, who's going to stop them? They're the only ones that can stop themselves. But if it's unconstitutional to do it, it's a whole nother animal. Any piece of legislation that they put forth that has more than one subject in it is null and void. Any one. And there's no argument for them to be allowed to do that, to put more than one subject in. There's no the reason for this is they need to tie their name to what that bill is doing. And when it's done the other way, they're not tying their name to it. They're giving themselves the out to explain away why we spend, $100 million to investigate the sex habits of Japanese quail under the influence of cocaine. Obviously, that sounds insane. But if you say, why did you vote for that? They will tag it to, well, that was on a veterans bill. We needed to take care of the veterans, and the only way I could get it through. Like, no, it's not the only way you could get it through. Like, this idea that life is not all choices is insane to me. Only Rand Paul and a handful of others actually call this garbage out. Lizards on treadmills and all the other nonsense money laundering that goes on with our tax dollars. It's just absolutely insane. And a single subject bill will smash the fiscal restraint section of this particular convention of states. It will smash. It's perfect for it. It's right in the wheelhouse. And you can almost, that's one of those ones that has a very high probability of getting passed. Why? Of getting ratified. Why? Because most states already do it. Just like term limits, most states already do term limits. So they would easily pass a term limits amendment easily. But these are the core issues, and Trump can't do this, right? Trump can't do this. Scott, what's up, sir? How are you? Over on Facebook, George, thank you for your continued education of this clusterfuck we call the legislative branch. Yeah, it is a hot mess. It is a hot mess. And again, they write this legislation specifically to keep it a cluster F, right? That's the whole point, is to keep it a cluster F. They just want to make sure it's as confusing as humanly possible, so nobody, even the legislators, will have no idea what the hell's in it. And when someone calls them out on something, then they just blame, oh, well, I had to do it in order to get this done. Don't you want that to get done? Well, then we had to check out this. We had to study these lizards on a treadmill. We had to do it. It's just insanity. And it's what's disturbing is that it's so commonplace. And the fact that it's bipartisan, if I hear the word bipartisan one more time, I'm going to throw up in my mouth. Like, these are the type of dysfunctionalities that a simple constitutional amendment, a very clear, easily written constitutional amendment, any piece of legislation from the House or Senate must be on one topic, and that topic must be represented in the title. And like I said, I would throw in no more than 20 or 25 pages at number 8 font. And that's it. Very simply written, right? Just like the right to bear arms shall not be infringed, right? It's very simply written. It's clear. And there's not a lot of room for the Supreme Court or some future Supreme Court to toy around with it and come up with some bizarre explanation that gives the government more power. And you cut the pork that gets cut just from having that alone would be more impactful even than a balanced budget amendment. Like that's, and which is another amendment, by the way, that would easily get through, because again, states can't print their own money, so they have balanced budgets. Well, unless you live in California, New York, and the utopia zones of Marxism. They run deficits all the damn time, and the federal government keeps bailing them out. Well, of course, they're going to have to get themselves in check soon, because I could bet you those checks aren't going to be coming in anymore. Which sucks for me, because I live in California, the People's Republic of California. So the Lord knows what kind of madness I'm in for. Like, Lord only knows. It's just crazy to me that's even a thing. But it is. And that's the way our government operates, and that's why it's so important to make sure that we're not anytime I get a text while the broadcast is on, because I'm running solo, I just want to make sure, like, you can hear me, that there's like sometimes there'll be people blowing up my text and I'm blowing them off like, no, I'm in a broadcast. And later on, I realized I had no audio, and I look at my text right in the beginning. They're like, you have no audio. So I do have a habit of looking over at that. But yeah, that's the principle. That's the point, right? That's the reason why this convention is so important. And I listen to people in their comments, and I listen to them say things like, well, it's never going to get done. This has been going on for, 9 years, 10 years, never going to happen. And I'm like, every constitutional amendment that has ever happened has taken over a decade. Every single one. And then the climate becomes right, and things start to bounce. And again, the climate couldn't be better than it is right now. We've got J.D. Vance, who's a supporter of Convention of States, Pete Hegseth, for Defense Secretary, who's a supporter of Convention of States, Huckabee, the ambassador to Israel, supporter of Convention of States. Gates is a supporter, but obviously he's no longer in play. And even this Coconut Johnson, who I am not a fan of. But, whatever, if if he can help get it done, if he can help bolster support for it, I just don't know where he would bolster support from. I don't think anybody likes this guy. I don't think anybody, the fact that he even put this through and thought that it would get approved is insane. But when you're in office for so long, and I think that, I think Johnson's heart might be in the right place, but he's been in this game for so damn long that there are just things he accepts that soon he won't be accepting. Like, I just think there are things that he, look, we got to keep the government open. We don't want to take, like, he's still living in the R's and D's world, right? He's still living in the, well, Republican voters will be this and Democrat voters will be that. Like he's still living in that cocoon. And it's just nonsense. Like, that's not how we're voting now. Like, for truth, nationwide, Congress was kind of a sideshow. It shouldn't have been. It should always be that important. But the fact of the matter is, it was a sideshow. This election, there was so much anxiety in this election. Like, I don't see how anyone that goes and votes and pulls a lever for Trump pulls the lever for a Democrat anywhere on that ticket. But somehow, like always, they end up, oh, well, this state, this Democrat won House, this Democrat won Senate. Oh, but they all voted for Trump. But Trump won the state. Like, that's impossible for a significant enough number of people to go into a voting booth and do that. But yet, here we are, right? And Trump talks about this all the time. All the time. And it just it's the issues with the election are like just one scratch of the surface, although they're paramount and key to everything. But keep in mind, we call a convention, we get it. Even if the amendments that we want, if all of them don't get ratified, just the mere process of having completed it is a major muscle flex. Like, gone will be the entire power dynamic in this country will have changed. No longer will we be looking outward for change. No longer will we be, and we won't have to keep calling conventions. We can, but we won't have to. We just merely need to threaten one. And that's what changes the dynamic. We got our Bill of Rights this way, for those that don't understand. The Bill of Rights was not passed with the Constitution. It was added in a few years later. And it was added in because of people like Patrick Henry and George Mason, who just absolutely would not accept the Constitution as is. And Madison and company, they all believed that the Constitution was fine the way it was, but that insistence and the fear from Madison and the rest, including Washington and others, that fear that, these guys they could just screw this whole thing up. And that fear of them taking action got them to put in the Bill of Rights. Can you even imagine the Constitution without the Bill of Rights? Can you even imagine no First Amendment, no Second Amendment? Can you even imagine that? Like, that's what the power of a convention can be, right? And so it's important, right? It's important that the topics are clearly outlined, and they are, right? All three topics, and I'll go back to them here. All three topics are restrictive. There is no power that can be added to the federal government under these topics, none. But they're restrictive, they're specific, but they're broad enough that it allows us to make some real change. It allows us to do things like tackle, like term limits is a softball, right? But to actually add a balanced budget amendment with teeth into our Constitution is a big deal. It's a big deal. Overturning the 16th Amendment. Trump has talked about this. I did my last video explaining on things Trump wants to do. He wants to eliminate the income tax, go back to a tariff system. That's what he wants, and that's absolutely the way to go. Comparatively, right? When you look at the lower population, etc., we were at our richest, we were at our wealthiest when there was no income tax. And the fact is, we would be again. We would be again. Because a consumer tax is the way to go. Everybody contributes. Everyone. There would be far more money being taken in than gets taken in today. And it would hurt a hell of a lot less because you would now control your taxes, right? You would now say, okay, you know what? I had to pay for this, and this week or this month, so I'm going to hold off on that. It's the taxes are a little high. I'm gonna go ahead and just do this and this, or I need to save money right now. I'm not paying those taxes. I'm not buying that stuff because I don't want to pay the taxes on it. I'll wait until there's a better time for me to do it. You'll have control over how you pay taxes. Right, and that's what's constitutional. Like that amendment, income tax. The reason there is an amendment for it in the 16th Amendment is because it was unconstitutional. The only way to get it through was to pass an amendment, was to get an amendment ratified. That was the only way. They were trying for decades. They could not do it. It was consistently shot down as unconstitutional. Right? These are the types of injustices we can rectify. Like this, and it's a big deal. Like these are big, impactful things. When people say, "Oh, $36 trillion debt, man, that's just too out of control, man. We better just put on our seatbelts and get ready for the crash." Like that's crazy. Why would you do that? Just get rid of it. Just get rid of the income tax, generate more revenue, get rid of the IRS. It will no longer be necessary. Because the revenue will just be what it is. It'll be whatever's collected in income tax. I mean, it makes all the sense in the world. And Trump wants to do it. But he knows he can't because it's in the Constitution. He needs a constitutional amendment to do that. And with the support that we have right now in his cabinet, I guarantee you, Vivek Ramaswamy, another supporter, these people are going to be in his ear. They're going to be in his ear, and they're going to tell him, look, we can get rid of these regulatory agencies forever. Like, we can defang these regulatory agencies forever. We just got to support this convention. And they can help guide it. They can help. They'll own the message. What they will do, what Donald Trump coming out and supporting the calling of a convention of states will be the greatest achievement any president has ever gotten done. If he's the one responsible for pushing those last 15 states across the finish line to add on to the 19 we have, and can seriously sway the vote in favor of the amendments that we're looking for, they'll be telling this story 250 years from now in textbooks about the day it all changed and the day Marxism died. That's the story that will be told to your great grandchildren. And I joke with grassroots cause supporters now, and I'm like, whenever you're at an event and they're taking your picture, make sure you get your best side, because those pictures may very well end up in a textbook somewhere 200 years from now, and you want to look good. You want to look good. But all right, so the other part that I wanted to talk about was this. So I'm reading about these drones and the drones, right? And, for one, if you remember my initial analysis was the government knows what these things are, right? We talked about that last week, and I'm like, there's no way with our tech that the government has no idea what these drones are. I don't care if they are aliens. They know they're aliens. Like the government knows what these drones are. And I said that unequivocally, and I meant it, and I was right. And Trump got asked that question just recently, and here was his answer.
Good to see you.
Can you comment on the drones that are flying around in New Jersey reports? It seems like they're big.
The government knows what is happening. Look. Our military knows where they took off from. If it's a garage, they can go right into that garage. They know where it came from and where it went. And for some reason, they don't want to comment. And I think they'd be better off saying what it is. Our military knows and our president knows. And for some reason, they want to keep people in suspense. I can't imagine it's the enemy because if it was the enemy, they'd blast it out. Even if they were late, they'd blast it. something strange is going on. For some reason, they don't want to tell the people, and they should, because the people are really. I mean, they happen to be over Bedminster. They're very close to Bedminster. I think maybe I won't spend the weekend in Bedminster. I've decided to cancel my trip.
Have you received an intelligence briefing on the drones?
I don't want to comment on that.
All right, so and he finishes that off with, I don't want to comment on whether I've gotten a briefing or not. Now, normally I would say, of course he got a briefing, and when you say I don't want to comment on it, that means you got a briefing. And he probably did at some level. However, he did make a comment where he was like, I would think if they're enemies, that even if they were late, they would have taken him out already, which means he doesn't exactly know that, right? But he knows that the government knows, right? And this is really close to the vest inside the government. I'm sure it is. And I'm sure they have not fully disclosed what exactly they're doing, but they should be. They should be, because he is the president-elect, but we know that's not going to happen. And I definitely didn't have aliens and Iranian drones on my bingo card for what's going to happen before January 20th, but here we are, right? But Trump knows, he knows enough to know the government knows what they are. So now the question is just, well, what are they doing? And why are they doing it? And what the hell is going on? So, but in the end, I'm reading about it and I'm thinking to myself, why don't the states just take action on these things? Like the states have EMPs, like states have stuff that could take these things out of the air. Why are they not taking action on these things? And in trying to figure out why, I learned, well, there are FAA regulations that prevent states from taking action on drones to prevent dangerous situations. Now, there was zero clarity on what those regulations were or how they would be used. However, it's just nonsense. There is no world where the FAA, a regulatory agency, can create a regulation to prevent a state from protecting itself anywhere. In fact, if you really want to get constitutional about it, there is no world where the FAA can make up any punishable rule, call it a regulation, and try and make someone take action on it. This is where the fight is. Now, does that mean we don't need an FAA? We don't need, governance of the skies? I would say private sector could do it for sure, but that's not even my problem. My problem is when it gets into situations like this, where you've got, what can clearly be a threat. Now, they keep saying, even though we have no idea what it is, it's not threatening. Well, how would you know that if you don't know what the hell it is? Again, leading to the fact that they do indeed know what the hell it is. Which drives me nuts, because it's so insulting the way that they say this stuff. Content Contact over on YouTube. There we go. We have a viewer on YouTube. I always question why I still stream there, but you, my friend, make it all worth it. All right. So I think the FAA gives regulations. I think the FAA regulations give states pause. They would have to verify that will not be an issue. They don't want their incoming money, which came from them in the first place, to not arrive. Again, you're probably right. So when I say again, I hadn't said that before. You're probably right. It probably does have to do with money, right? But in the end, we're talking about a situation where, there's safety at risk here. And I'm not really into it as to the real motivations as to why the states are complying, although I appreciate that response. I'm more into it to the fact that there's absolutely no obligation to comply. None. Now, you would tell them, right, look, we're taking action on these drones, because communication is a good thing, right? And you're going to start knocking things out of the sky. You should let, again, unlike the federal government, you let them know we're taking it out. And it would actually be a good litmus test, because if you do let the FAA know, look, we got this drone at this location right here, we're taking it out. We've got it in our sights, we're taking it out. If that drone immediately starts making evasive maneuvers, then we got our answer, right? Then we got our answer. was here for Victor David Hansen vid. Yeah, no, not here. Although honestly, I don't know who Victor David Hansen is, so I have to tell you. Now you're making me look him up because I feel like I'm ignorant for not knowing that. But let's see. Victor David Hansen. I'm sure there's some. Oh, I know him. I'm sorry. I didn't know his name. I know him very well. And tell me what vid that he put out, because it escaped me. I was working right up until the to the broadcast. So let me know what video he put out. I know him well. I just looked him up and I'm like, oh yeah, I must have used him at least 100 times in videos. I got to start getting better with remembering people's names. All right. So, but I guess the point that I was bringing into, as far as why it bothered me that the states would hold back because of the FAA, is that it's just, they don't have to. And this is another issue. Like when this convention of states deals with regulatory agencies, this is one of the things they will deal with, right? This is one of the things they will deal with. It is the fact that regulatory agencies cannot restrict. Like, people need to understand the relationship between states and the federal government is parent and child, and it's the states who are the parents, and it's important to understand that that's how the relationship works. So people get it confused because, they'll say, oh, well, federal law will trump, state law. And I would say poppycock. and the reason I say that is because while it technically is that way, I could give you a perfect example in marijuana laws. So if the federal government truly was trumping state law, then these dispensaries that have opened up publicly all over the country would be getting raided by the feds on a daily basis, but they are not. Why? Because the federal government knows not to pick a fight with the states. That's why. It will lose. Oh, but they've got the military and all this. The military, good luck running that military and trying to attack U.S. states with it. There is no path for the federal government to enforce its laws on the states if the states are absolutely hell-bent against listening. It's just, you could arrest. Now, you look at the border situation, they want to interfere with ICE. If they don't help ICE, nobody's getting arrested. If they try to interfere, they can be arrested. These mayors and governors and whatever can be arrested. If they're giving orders to prevent the government from actually carrying out its constitutional duties with immigration, they can be arrested. But technically, you could say that could happen for marijuana as well. But it doesn't, because it's not a fight that the federal government's willing to. Your parents say they're doing something, you tell them it's a bad idea, they're going to do it anyway. And you can pout and kick and get mad. They didn't even do that. But you ain't stopping them. These marijuana dispensaries, they look like Apple stores for weed. It's freaking crazy. If you've never been in one, I maybe 5 or 6 years ago, whenever it first happened in California, I went into one because I just had to see. I enjoyed a little cannabis back in my youth, in my college days, and the idea of there actually being a store where you could go buy it was fascinating, but they can't use banks because they're federally insured. There's all kinds of nonsense that goes on. But you get my point. Regulatory agencies in general, the entire concept of a regulation being created by a regulatory agency is unconstitutional. Whether you like the resolution or not, it doesn't matter. It's a law, okay? If it's punishable, it's a law. They're not issuing guidelines. They're issuing laws, and they are not elected. And Congress does not have the authority to go ahead and mess with that. They don't have the authority to tell an agency, well, go ahead. Now, we're going to pass on our lawmaking powers to you, Mr. Unelected Official. They don't have that authority. So it's nonsense. And honestly, that's where, let me go back. That's where the government overreach comes in. Organizations like OSHA trying to tell employers, well, you have to terminate your employees if they don't take experimental drugs. Like, that's an overreach that's just absolutely absurd. But yet, it happened. And yeah, the Supreme Court shot it down, but what if they didn't? If you read their opinions, Kavanaugh and Barrett, they were saying the problem they had was that Congress didn't explicitly give OSHA that authority. It was Gorsuch, Alito, and Thomas who turned around and were like, even if Congress did give them that authority, they don't have the authority to give them that authority. But you know what? Kavanaugh and Barrett would have been enough. So in the end, like, we don't need to be putting these matters to the Supreme Court because they're in stuff like this that are obvious, they can't be trusted. If anything, the Supreme Courts have taught us over a century is that they're more than willing to give the federal government, I mean, just look at the Commerce Clause, they're more than willing to give the federal government as much power as it damn well needs. And when I say needs, I mean needs to friggin' absolutely dominate the culture and have its tentacles in just about every single facet of your life. The Gorsuchs, the Thomases, these guys are not they're not the norm. Alito, not the norm. Roberts, that's the norm. Kavanaugh, Barrett, those are the norm. And they're far more, and Roberts is as political as it gets. Roberts will make a decision simply because he doesn't want the court to look partisan. Even if it's the wrong decision, he'll make it just because he doesn't want the court to look partisan. Like, that's not okay. And that's not a place where you want to be putting your faith. Like, it's great that they've recently, in recent years, they've made some good decisions and whatnot. But, like, there are a few deaths and replacements in this shuffling away from the whole thing going right back to pumping in, well, Congress can really do whatever it wants in terms of taxes. We've always given them, our precedent shows they get wide open leeway. Like, that's not okay. That's not okay. Anyway, those were my two main beefs. And the reason that they were beefs, obviously, me being me, this broadcast being this broadcast, is that those are two things that could...
Comment on the drones that are flying around in New Jersey reports. It seems
good grief. All right, good grief. That thing just keeps popping up on its own. All right, so the reason that they're such a big deal to me is because they can be avoided. They piss off everyone, and they can be avoided, right? This omnibus bill, there's no need for it. There's no need for it. A simple single subject amendment fixes that problem for eternity. All right? Now, technically, yeah, another amendment can be proposed to overturn a single subject amendment, but who's going to vote for that? Where are you going to find 3/4 of the states to ratify an amendment like that? There's just no way. But these topics, I mean, you're talking, there are some 70%, even Democrat voters, okay, are either in favor of those topics or are not sure. They are not against those topics. All right. Another, 70% of Republican voters and independents are like 60. Like, it's an overwhelming majority in all cases, 2/3 and higher for people that do not oppose these topics. These topics are almost everything that's wrong with this country. Now, again, if we get enough solid amendments on these three topics, well, now we have a flex, right? Even if we don't, we have a flex, because just imagine a world, instead of Obama being able to go up, or Bush for that matter, and tell you that Obamacare or the Patriot Act is what the people want, and it's what, and just lie to your face and tell you what American people want. Instead of that happening, they're going to be looking over their shoulder and being like, how many states? Mr. President, there are 17 states currently, and there are 7 more hearing it next week. You know, all right, scrap the whole thing. Scrap the whole thing. Forget it. That's called a muscle flex, right? We wouldn't even have to call the convention. We just have to threaten it like, look, do we really have to take more power from you guys? Is that necessary? Right? I mean, if it got to the point where the borders just continued to be as they are, you know, the convention being called would be like, you know, we'd start up a convention and it would be like, look, I mean, I know the Constitution has you guys in control of the borders and immigration, but it's clear that you're not wanting to do that job. So, two choices. You do that job or we do that job for you. And we take that ability away from you because clearly you're too incompetent to handle it. What do you think is going to happen? Do you think we'd have to pass an amendment like that? Or do you think that the federal government would wake the hell up and not want to lose the power to control immigration and go and secure borders? Like this is how we play. This is how the power dynamic should be, right? I forgot who said it, but when, you know, when the people feel government, it's tyranny. When the government feels the people, it's freedom, right? That's how it should be. They should be afraid of us, not the other way around. And yes, they should be afraid. Like there should be none of this kumbaya crap. Like the federal government is absolutely a necessary evil in this world. We need it for certain things, and that was understood with the failure of the Articles of Confederation, but it's not needed for everything that it does. And this idea that it needs all these regulatory agencies, like states can handle their own work safety. They can handle their own education. There's no need for the federal government in these cases. No need. I mean, you can go on and on. Urban development, another wasted. Each one of these things does more harm than good. Each one of them. And the EPA, they can stay around. They just can't create regulations, but they can enforce stuff. If Congress passes legislation to help the environment, then yeah, the EPA can enforce it. They just can't create new stuff because they're not elected. That's kind of how this works. Right? So, all right. So, folks, all right. So, I will be on next week. It looks like the chat is slow today, so I have no idea how many people are actually watching. I get that information later. It doesn't, I stopped looking at it live because when there's too many people, then I feel like I have to, you know, be a certain way. If there's not enough people, then it gets distracting. So I just, you know, let me take a quick peek and just see. It looks like across the platform, it's probably about 15 to 20. X doesn't give you, I mean, X says 20 view. I don't know if that's concurrent or 20 total. But anyway, it's about 20 or 25 or so, which is fine. But everyone seems to be a little quiet, and that's fine too, because it keeps me on schedule and I can go enjoy an adult beverage before going to bed this evening. All right, folks. Well, until next time, I appreciate you. Contact and Scott Morris, thank you for your comments. Always remember, I'm going to try to be on every Thursday night. When you click the subscription button or follow or whichever platform you're watching on, we're on Facebook, X, YouTube, and Rumble. Make sure you click notify when live because I'm trying to come on every Thursday night, but sometimes I cannot because this is not a career, right? Just trying to hang in there and keep people educated on certain topics and look at things from a little bit of a different perspective, in particular a civics perspective, right? And then, of course, educate folks on Article 5. So until next time, folks, I appreciate you. I'm out. Well, maybe not. Let's try this again. All right. Maybe I am hanging out because my system won't let me leave. Hold on a minute. Yeah, these shady characters. Man, guys, I'll tell you, I can't even leave smoothly. What the hell is going on here? Hold on. All right. I'm going to try this again. Looks like I might have lost my outro somehow. It's not feeding. I clicked the button, but it's not doing my outro. So on that note, I guess I'm just going to go. Peace.